I'm speaking today to Mary, and Mary is her anonymous name that we're going to use because there might be people listening that might identify her, and then that would bring her livelihood into jeopardy. And Mary's going to talk to us about her lifetime and childhood experience of being in a religious community and how she got in, how she got out, and all the stages in between, and maybe a little bit afterwards. So, Mary, welcome.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So, tell me, like, how did this all start for you? How did you find yourself in this community?
Well, it started generations ago because I was born into it, and the particular church that I grew up in, I was just my parents were already in it, and I was born there. I was raised there my entire life. So yeah, it stretches back quite a long time. It was all I ever knew for most of my life.
Thank you. So, if it was all that you ever knew, how did you how did you come to the awareness that there was something else on the other side?
Well, the s- the specific church that I grew up in was a very small, insular kind of church. And we always knew there were other churches around us in our town, in the broader world. Um, so I knew that there was other churches, other people, other communities out there, but we weren't really ever allowed or encouraged to associate with them. And so I really did grow up in a really small, tiny bubble.
Mm. Thank you. And then, so how did you start to know or realize that this wasn't for you?
It took a very long time, actually, because I never had any thoughts or any questionings about any of it till probably my late teenage years. And I for most of my life I just wanted to be a part of that community, and I thought that I would just be in it forever, and I would get married and settle down and have my own kids in that community and just stay there forever is kind of what I thought until my later teenage years, when I
Mm.
started to have these really tiny little glimmers of questioning, really, is this all there is? Is this really the only true church we should belong to?
Mm. And how did these glimmerings come about? Like, what did you see specifically?
Well, the first one that I can remember at least happened, I guess I was maybe 17, 18 years old. And um, I was always taught that there's a specific way to act as a Christian in this particular church. And my parents were even more strict compared to other parents in our church. And I guess as I got older in the teenage years, I saw many of my peers kind of like experimenting with other things and dabbling in other things and like maybe getting drunk or going, I don't know, to a party or smoking. And I had a very strong, rigid pattern in place by this point, and I kind of looked at them and thought, oh, well, you're not acting very Christian, and we're supposed to be part of the true church, but yet you're not acting very Christian.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
I started to question, like, well, if we are the true church, like, why are they acting like that? And all they have to do is confess their sins in front of the church one service, and they're all good to go. And so I just kind of, it didn't sit right with me, I guess. And so that was the first little questioning I had, that, like, is this really all there is to it? And yeah, there's something more here.
Thank you. So it didn't sit right. So we're leaning more into the body and the body's wisdom. If there's something that's off here, it didn't sit right. So like, and I hear the kids like experimenting with alcohol and drinking, and then the the magic wand of waving. If you confess in front of the church, then all of your sins are forgiven. And did you find people that were confessing about the same stuff over and over again, or?
Yeah, and I remember like some of my peers, they'd stand up in church. They had confessed already to the elders, and then they just had to do it publicly in front of the church. And it was usually something like drunk driving or sex before marriage, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Thank you. And this is a Christian community. It was Christian. So what about it? What about the Christian side of it made it either appealing or unappealing for you?
Um, well, it was all I knew. I didn't really question anything other than Christianity. We were always told that like to be a Christian means you're going to heaven, and especially being in this church, you're going to heaven, and everyone else, even the churches down the road, they're heretical churches, and your neighbors who don't go to church, well, they're going to hell. So I just never questioned. I just kind of thought, well, you have to be a Christian to make it out to the other side.
Thank you. Thank you. I can hear the question I want to ask you is about the afterlife and how was the afterlife sold to you?
I There was a fair bit of teaching about the end times, and we were told that, Jesus is coming soon. We don't know when he's coming, but he's coming. He's going to judge you for all your sins, and he's going to destroy this earth. And his chosen ones, who he has chosen, they're going to be safe. Like he's going to take them up to heaven and create a new heaven and an earth for them up there. Everyone else is going to burn in hell. And so it was very scary. The image in my head was this Zeus-like god sitting up in heaven on his throne and just waiting for you to mess up and do a little sin or a big sin. And yeah, you better not do that because, well, the end times are coming and you need to make sure you're good. But at the same time, my church that I was in believed that, well, because we were the chosen church, we had the purest doctrine. God had already chosen us. So in that sense, it kind of didn't matter what you did because if you did mess up, all you had to do was, like I said before, just publicly confess your sins in front of everyone, and then you're all good again.
Thank you. So you mentioned before little sin or big sin. What's the difference between those two? Like how do you tease those apart?
Yeah, I guess, well, every Sunday, every morning service, we had to go to church twice on Sundays, but every morning service, the minister would recite the Ten Commandments. And it always felt like some of the smaller ones might be like telling a lie, that might be a little one, or even a more ambiguous commandment like honor your father and your mother. That might be a little bit of a smaller one, but the big ones would be like don't steal, don't commit adultery, um, don't kill someone, that kind of thing.
Mm,
So yeah, I felt like those were like the big sins, like you didn't do that, and then there was just the everyday ones that didn't matter as much.
thank you. So how do you think like being sold these end times and heaven and hell impacted your childhood?
Um, I guess I would say I was always sort of afraid of making a wrong move, but at the same time, like telling me that Jesus is coming soon, it just felt so vague and far away, and like it didn't really impact me that much. Like I didn't like have nightmares about it or anything like that. It just felt very far away and like, well, we don't know when exactly it's going to happen, so
Yeah, thank you. I can hear this like a nebulous concept in the future. Like Jesus is coming soon, but what does that actually mean? Like, when is he coming? Like, is it decades? Is it years? Like, how much time have I got to prepare for this second coming?
right.
What? Afraid of making the wrong move. Afraid of making the wrong move was something that stood out to me there in what you just said. So, how has afraid of making the wrong move impacted your adult life?
I guess for me, it's not like I'm concerned about like quote unquote sinning anymore. It's just, um, making sure I present the right face, like do the right thing, say the right thing. Um, yeah,
Thank you.
things like that.
Do the right thing and say the right thing. I can hear your voice is shifting a little bit. So do the right thing and say the right thing. How do you know when you're saying the right thing or doing the right thing?
I guess I'm still trying to figure that out, like as
Mm,
a felt sense of it. But I mean, at this point, I don't like look to somebody else to tell me if I'm doing the right thing. But I guess I still do look to someone else as far as to see if I'm saying the right thing. Like, oh, how do they react if I say that? Like, what is their facial expression if I say that? That kind of thing.
thank you. And were you allowed to have friends outside the church?
Um, it was allowed. I I wouldn't say it was specifically encouraged. Um, Part of what made it such a small bubble for me too was that I was not only did I go to this very small insular church that didn't associate with other churches down the road, but I was also, me and my siblings, we were homeschooled the whole way through K to 12. And so, I mean, we mostly just associated with other homeschoolers from our church and sometimes from the community too. And that wasn't exactly frowned upon, but we weren't encouraged to develop like closer relationships with them.
Yeah, thank you. So in our work together, there was a few things that really stood out to me. And one of them was how when you and your siblings got into trouble, you'd be dragged into the living room or whatever room it was, and you'd be spoken to for however long. And then the other one was your relationship with clothing, like
But
jeans and dresses. So give the people listening a little bit of a background, specifically to the clothing one first, and then I'll double into the discipline, the family discipline.
sure. Um, so the church that I grew up in, it was like very normal. Like all the men wore suits to church. Three-piece suits, maybe two-piece, but still, it was a suit, usually a black suit. Um, Tie, that kind of thing. All the women wore skirts or dresses. Um, all the girls did as well. And but then when there was other um services, maybe not services, but other church functions that happened throughout the week, or like youth group that happened maybe on Sunday night, then you were free to change into jeans and, more comfortable clothes. Um, but my parents, they liked to take everything a step further, it felt like. And so me and my siblings, we had to, wear the regular Sunday good clothes to services, but then also whenever we had to go to catechism class during the week or youth group on Sunday nights, my parents figured because it was still a church function and because you were still like worshiping the Lord or learning about God, you still had to be dressed to show that you were, worshiping God. And so there was lots of, so yeah, my sister and I, we always had to wear skirts to all those functions, even when our friends didn't have to wear skirts to those extra functions. And yeah, there was an emphasis on modesty. So skirts had to be a certain length. If it was like a couple inches too high up the knee, well, that was no good. And make sure your neckline isn't too low and all this stuff. So yeah, my parents took things an extra step further, and then there was also that culture of modesty throughout the church itself.
Yeah, thank you. And how do you feel like that modesty message has impacted your relationship with your body and intimacy today?
Um, I feel like it's still hard for me to, well, not really hard. I've never wanted to like really dress in a certain way. I just always have wanted to look nice and fit in. But even, yeah, even if am like at the store trying on something, I am like pretty cognizant of, well, how does this dress make you look? And what are people going to think if they see you wearing this?
Thank you. What are people going to think? Thank you.
hmm
That's the ping. That's the ping for me. That's the post-it note for me that I'll come back to. So, and then in your family, you had this room that you'd all go to when something was wrong or there was a family discussion or something needed to be brought to the attention. Give us an idea about how that came about and what that was like for you.
Yeah, it was usually the living room, as I recall. Usually, if my dad was upset about something, or I don't know, he wanted to enforce a new rule that he had thought of that he thought we were kind of sliding down on or something, he would call us all for a family meeting to the living room and tell us what the new rule was and why we had to um, abide by this new rule, or maybe it was a rule that was already in place, but he noticed that we weren't really quite following it well enough. Then we'd be called into the living room for a meeting, and he would kind of lay down the law again and remind us, hey, this is how you're supposed to be in this family.
Mm, thank you. So in that, would you say that a lot of the rules were either motivated by either fear of damnation or love of life?
Definitely a fear of damnation. And also, I've learned now that my dad was always very concerned about what other people thought of him and how his family looked to other people on the outside.
Thank you. And would you say that you were always cognizant of that? Like when you're out in public or wherever you're liaising with community, there'd be a thought in the back of your mind of, "Oh, I wonder how dad would react to this."
Kind of, yeah. Usually when we were around dad, we were kind of like walking on eggshells, like, oh, like make sure dad doesn't see that, or if you're gonna do that, make sure it's like discreet or something like that if dad's around.
Right. And would your mother participate in that?
From what I can sense now, later, she was the one who had to enforce the rules most of the time. Because my dad, well, he was at work most of the time during the week. My mom stayed home with all of us, and so she was the one who had to enforce most of the rules.
Do you think she liked doing that? Do you think she liked enforcing the rules?
I don't think so, but I
Mm.
don't think she knew that she had a choice
Mm.
back then.
And what gave you the inclination that you didn't really enjoy enforcing these rules?
Well, this is just, I guess, my own point of view now, kind of placing that on her, but I can't kind of comprehend how she would enjoy doing that all the time, especially when you see that enforcing the rules is making your kids unhappy. Like, she was the one who had to enforce the rule for my sister and I that no, you have to wear a skirt to Tuesday night catechism class. Like, and we tried, like almost every week, we tried to reason with her, or bargain with her, or try to like make her see that it was okay if we just wore some pants, but nope, she would never let up on that. And I mean, yeah, it made my sister and I really upset. And so I can't imagine how she would have enjoyed having to enforce that all the time.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. And what was catechism class? What did you learn in catechism class?
Oh yeah, sorry for those who don't know. It's sort of like Sunday school, I guess. Um, but it wasn't on Sundays, of course, and it was a lot of it started when you were in kindergarten, age 5, and you would go until about the end of high school. And at the beginning, when you were young, it was a lot of simple memory work. You would learn a small, short Bible verse or memorize it, and then also memorize a song for that week. When you were young, it would go through like the Bible stories, like Noah's Ark and Adam and Eve, and different parables and things like that. And then as you got older, then you kind of moved on to more of the doctrinal side of things that our particular denomination believed in. So you'd have to memorize all these doctrines and how did they work and what did they mean. And then when you got to the end of that, you could make profession of faith or confession of faith, it was sometimes called. And that was when you would stand up in front of the church and you would confess that, yes, I believe in these doctrines. I believe Jesus is my savior, that kind of thing. And then you were considered a member of the church, and well, you couldn't vote if you were a woman, but you were considered a member of the church. And then, of course, you were also expected to give more money to the church.
Right.
So that was kind of the trajectory of what catechism class was through the years.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I hear it would train children to be more deeper devotees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, cool, cool. And so you mentioned some stories there, like Adam and Eve. So how was Adam and Eve used as a tale or as a story in your church?
Oh gosh, it's been a while since I've thought of that. I guess we were just taught like God created the world in 6 days. He rested on the seventh day, and then a little while later, Adam and Eve um, were tempted by the devil, and the devil told Eve, "You can eat that apple from the tree," even though God had told her she couldn't eat it, and she ate it, and then Adam and Eve were cast out of the Garden of Eden, and that was when sin entered into the world, is what we were taught.
Hmm.
I really never really thought much of it. It was just kind of a story to me about how sin got into the world.
Thank you. And what was sin for you in that church?
Um, I think it was just anything you did that went against what you knew or what you taught you shouldn't do. Um, but also there was a I remember this there was a doctrine called original sin that was taught quite a bit, and that doctrine taught that, well, you were already sinful before you were born. Like you didn't even do anything yet, and you were already a sinner. And so just by nature of being you and being a human here on earth, you were a sinner, and that's why you needed to be saved, and you needed God and Jesus and the church and all of this stuff. And I mean, looking back at that now, it's really sad to me. Um, and I remember like our church practiced infant baptism. So you never really got baptized as an adult. On a rare occasion, if a new convert came into the church, they might be baptized as an adult. But otherwise, if you were in the church and you had kids, they were baptized as an infant. And so I was, and all my siblings were. And as I grew up in the church, I witnessed a lot of infant baptisms, like all these new babies who were born, and their parents would present them to be baptized, which was just a little sprinkle of water on their heads. And then the pastor would read a form every time. It was the same form. And that form would always mention, like word for word, we know that children are conceived and born in sin. And that was just the message that was like indoctrinated into me. And therefore, that gave parents the license to train up the children in the way they should go, to use another Bible verse. And then they're allowed to spank their kids and shame them and rule with an iron fist because, well, they're sinful and we need to mold them a certain way. And so yeah, that really sticks with me because it's so insinuous and so sad.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yeah, I can hear the sadness in your voice, and also the just the gravity and the realization of how this continuously perpetuates. Um, from my experience, and because I've been in church, not as strict as yours or as insular as yours,
Hmm.
um, but there's definitely this concept of the original sin. And what's shown up in my later life of going through the I Ching and discovering the I Ching after, like after human design and after gene keys and after astrology and after tarot and after oracle cards and after all this other like pagan stuff, all the other things that I've tried, was the I Ching was something that spoke to and finally touched on these concepts of original sin and how they anything that puts a like a permanent stain on somebody's being is outside of cosmic harmony,
Mm,
which means that there is no such thing as original sin. Like you're born with a fresh slate. You're born with there's nothing that you inherited from the past. And for me, that felt so freeing. And then whenever
right.
I share that with other people, so what do you mean? Especially ex-Christians who a lot of Christians do subscribe to original sin, and that you're a tainted being that you need to continuously ask for forgiveness, like grovel to God or grovel to Jesus or be whatever it is in order to absolve yourself of spending life in eternal damnation or being punished by God. So thank you for speaking to that, the original sin concept and
Hmm.
baptism, because I think it's they're two ritualistic lock and key practices that keep flooding the body with this image of that we're flawed.
Right.
And I think psychosomatically, when you're hung with these belief systems, that you develop illnesses, psychosomatic illnesses over time that have no root cause in the environment. Well, your psyche is part of the environment, but where you have chronic illness, whether it's achy joints, whether it's psoriasis, whether it's even cancers, even other things that don't really have a root cause and what's initiated it, comes from the belief system of being that I'm flawed. There's something wrong with me, like well, cold sores. A lot of skin disorders relate to something feeling like you're unworthy and
Mm.
unworthy to show yourself. But yeah, thank you for opening that up, Mary. Is there anything else that you wanted to share on that?
Well, I just have a story that keeps coming back to me that I haven't always remembered it, but in the last year or two, I've had these like memories of this particular incident that sort of happened around this subject. And so just a bit of backstory. Um, there was always a nursery service for church, and all the women would take turns being in the nursery. And then when you're about 10 years of age as a girl, you could be a nursery helper and help in the nursery to take care of the babies and the toddlers that came in. And so when I was about 10, I was able to start that as a nursery helper. And I remember around that time, there was a single woman in our church, and she got pregnant out of wedlock. And this was like, it was pretty rare in our church at this point in time. And everyone was kind of like in shock and in horror. And but she did the thing. She went to the consistory and she confessed and like stood up publicly and confessed her quote unquote sin in front of the church. And she had this baby as a single mother. And I remember quite early on, like the baby was very young still, and she brought this little baby into the nursery in her car seat. And I mean, many mothers did this. They brought their babies into the nursery to be taken care of during the service. And after the service, even, everyone was always excited about the new babies that were born. And everyone wanted to hold the new babies and pass them around. And it was just always this big thing in the church with new babies. Everyone wanted to hold the new babies, including in the nursery. And so I remember being a nursery helper, and this single mother brought her little baby girl into the nursery. And nobody in the nursery wanted to hold this baby. Like they just left her in her car seat. And she wasn't crying or anything, she was sleeping. But ordinarily with another baby, they would have still picked up that baby and wanted to cuddle it and hold it. And but nobody ever did this in the nursery with this one little baby. And then even after the service when everyone was out mingling and stuff, nobody ever really asked to hold this new little baby from this single mother. And I mean, I didn't really think much of it at the time. I was just an observer at the time. But now I've thought about it, and it's just it's just horrific to me, actually. That level of mind control and that level of thinking that there's something inherently wrong with this baby, that she's not even worthy of being cuddled and held by other people. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that story.
Yeah, thank you. I can feel I can feel the heaviness and the distress, and also from the mother who's done what she's done. Okay, she's had sex out of marriage, so adultery, and then conceived and given birth out of wedlock. I was one of those babies too. I was a wedlock baby. Even the
Mm,
concept of wedlock implies back to that the purity type
totally.
like culture. Like, oh, it's pure. It's gonna be pure, more pure than less pure, more pure than
Right,
pure.
right.
But what I can also feel is the baby too of like being born into a community, and then all the other babies get this nurturance, so this community nurturance,
Right.
and the alienation. And then what also really stands out to me is, well, she confessed, right? So she confessed. So technically, the sin is absolved,
Right.
right, in the eyes of God. But then the community is still not letting go of the sin, right? They're
No,
punishing her
totally.
through their own morality or purity, the indoctrination, whatever that's there, of like, no, she's actually dirty. But in the eyes of God, in the context of the religion, like,
Right.
she's done. She's confessed it. Like it's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Confess. Go about raising that child as if it wasn't born out of wedlock.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just so crazy the how fucked up that really is.
Yeah, it really is. It
Yeah.
really is. Especially how, I mean, with the awareness that you had and you have, and that memory that's popped up, it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, if it's forgiven, it's forgiven. Like, if you confess, it's confessed. Like, if this culture, if our doctrine is the purest of all the doctrines, surely
Hmm.
in our practices that we would open her and the baby with open arms.
Right. Right.
Mm. So I know for me, in my experience, because I went to a Christian school and grew up in a mixed religion household. Um,
Hmm.
hypocrisy, hypocrisy was the undoing for me. That the more
Okay.
hypocrisy I saw, I was like, this ain't for me. Like this is you can't compete with the body versus the ideology. The biology versus ideology. The biology is always going to win. Like, for
Yeah.
example, the people that are smoking, drinking, and having sex out of marriage, that's biology.
Hmm.
So, in that biology, I know that the church in general tries to shame the flesh and make the flesh wrong.
Yeah.
But then for you, in your journey, what you've seen, what was the hypocrisy that you saw?
Yeah. Well, I guess that was just one of the examples. And then the other example that I shared earlier about the first little inkling I had about something isn't quite right here as a later teenager. And then for me, the last thing that helped me get out was a few years later. I was probably 20. And then I went off to university. And the university that I went to it was still a Christian university, but it was a lot more quote unquote liberal. They were a lot more open-minded than the insular little bubble that I grew up in. But anyway, so I went off to university and there were still pretty much all Christian students around me and Christian professors. But right away I realized, wow, like these students and these professors, hardly any of them went to the denomination that I grew up in, which said that it was the true church and
Mm.
was full of this hypocrisy. But yet, what I saw around me with these other students who were maybe Baptists or Pentecostals or other evangelicals, I saw that they acted a lot more Christianly than the ones who I grew up with. And so, yeah, that was I guess an example of hypocrisy to me because I had been taught my whole life that ours was the true church. But yet I saw that what people were doing in my church wasn't really quite what the Bible said we should be doing. But yet when I saw these other students around me acting a lot more Christianly and lovingly, that was kind of the last thing that opened my eyes, and I realized, wow, there's a bigger world out there, and I've been lied to about a lot of things.
Mm.
So
Thank
I guess
you.
I don't really have any um, other specific examples about hypocrisy that I saw, but yeah, more of those larger ones.
Great, great, great. Thank you. And so, in the interpretation of the Bible, was there anyone in particular who was responsible or had unquestioning authority in interpreting Bible verse?
That was the pastor,
Right,
the minister. Yeah.
right.
It was all sometimes the elders, but even the elders not quite as much. It was the pastor who had yeah been ordained by God to open up the word of God to these people in the church.
Right. Ordained by God. So how did you become a pastor of that particular denomination?
Yeah, actually our particular denomination even had their own seminary. So they could indoctrinate these pastors exactly how they wanted them, and that's what they did. So yeah,
Mm.
I think it was like a 3 or 4 year seminary program that you went to through our own denomination. And then you became a pastor.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. And I'm assuming only men could be
Only
pastors?
men, only men could be pastors. Only men could be elders or deacons. Um, yeah, the women didn't, like I said, they didn't even get to vote at like congregational meetings or anything.
Yeah, right. Right, right.
Yep.
And so usually in some churches who are more like cultish or enclosed, the men have all the advantages and the women are saddled with all the disadvantages. Did that play out in yours?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the men got like to say what we're going to believe, how things are going to be run. They got the final say on anything really, and it was the women's jobs to um, serve in the nursery on their when it was their turn, and also take their turn to serve coffee and juice after the services.
Hmm. I can hear the laughter in that. What's really there for you?
Well, it's just this mentality, I guess, that the women aren't good for anything else, or they're there to serve the men, really,
Hmm.
or that they're not smart enough to have an opinion, or that their opinion doesn't count. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you. And how does that mirror in your life today?
Um, I guess, I mean, as you know, have always have had a hard time expressing my opinions and saying what I think. I guess I've never really correlated that to growing up this way, but I'm sure it is a factor.
Hmm. So how did you get out, Mary? How did you read the writing on the wall and say, I can't be this way anymore. This isn't for me.
Yeah, so the two instances that I shared already, the noticing how my peers were acting around the church as I got to be a later teen, and then when I left, when I was about 20 years old, I went to university, like I said, and there my eyes were opened to that there's a whole other world out there. And there are many other Christians out there, not just from this particular denomination. And I mean, that was mind-blowing for me, actually. I think of it as I just grew up in this tiny little bubble. And then when I left for university, I think I was still in a bubble, but it was a bit of a bigger bubble. And I think I needed that because I think if I was just thrown out into the big wide world, I don't even think I would have survived.
Mm,
I think I still need that slightly bigger bubble to grow into a little bit more.
yeah.
And so I learned a ton through my university years, like not just for my degree, but just as a person and as as a Christian, really. I started to like really reject a lot of the beliefs that I was taught, and I didn't want to go back to that church, and I did actually eventually leave that denomination. So did my family, but they just went to a slightly different one. It wasn't much of a change. Um, so after my university years, I moved. My university that I went to was 24 hours away from home. It was in the States, and I went far away. And then when I um, graduated, I didn't want to move back to my small town hometown anymore. So I moved to a bigger city in a different province. And I started going to different churches. Ones that my old church would have told me, oh, that's a heretical church. Like they believe things that are not true and all this stuff. But I was going to them because I sensed that these people are a lot more genuine than the ones that I grew up with. And so, yeah, I started going to those churches instead. And I eventually like pulled my membership papers from the old church because back then you were tied to a church with your membership papers still in it, so you had to request to pull them out if you were gonna leave that church.
Yeah. Wow. I never heard of that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So you had membership papers, and then if you were gonna leave, you had to request to have them taken out. So I did that. I went to a new church, a different denomination, and I would say I grew a lot there in terms of just having my whole worldview expanded and realizing that a lot of the stuff that I was taught wasn't true, and the Bible actually um, had a lot more, what's the word? A lot more comforting truths than the ones that I was taught with.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm the
And
same with my journey with the Bible. There's a lot more nuance in
yeah,
when you interpret it, not as a literary, a literal literary book, when you see it through the lens of mythology and relationships. I think it's much more of a useful Freudian slip, a useful doctrine.
yeah.
And what were you going to say?
Oh, and yeah, so I was just gonna say, I spent several years in that church or that denomination, and then just because I was moving around a little bit in my new province, it just kind of meant I had to look for a new church, and so I would try looking for a new church, but I never felt at home in any of them. And and then by this time, I was also doing a lot of other research, like digging into other stuff about health and the body and the nervous system. And then COVID happened. And then all the churches basically shut down and it was just all online, but I hadn't really been feeling like I belonged in any of them anymore, anyways. And then because COVID happened, well, that sent me down many more rabbit holes of what's actually going on with our health system and the education system and the government and, all of these quote unquote conspiracy theories. Well, I went down the rabbit holes, and that included the rabbit hole of what actually is religion and where did it start and what is its purpose actually? And then my mind was like blown open, and then it was like, oh yeah. And then it's like, well, I don't need to go to church anymore. My church is out in nature. That's yeah. And then like my whole concept of God has changed, and like, so I feel like I've done all the intellectual work to like remove myself from religion now, and that specifically that cult-like religion that I was in.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love that transition to my church's nature.
Yeah.
And what I can also hear is for a lot of people, I think that the lockdowns and what happened over COVID, the pandemic, did send people inside themselves. There was no
Right.
escaping. You couldn't run anymore. There was no thing that you could use to distract yourself, like go to work or whatever.
Right.
You were forced to, okay, well, it's just me and me now. And I think a lot of us did find an opening of, well, what's really going on in the world? Like, what is this? What are these systems of control and conspiracy for control? Where are the, because then you spoke about your congregate, your old church had its own seminary. And
Hmm.
then, well, now that you've mentioned that, and now you've tied it back in with COVID, like how the other institutions have their own seminaries where they, like the doctors, mainstream medicine, pharmaceuticals, and
Right.
they all have their own seminaries where they
Yep.
continuously indoctrinate this same cycle of that this is the only way that you can get healthy. This is the only way that you can remedy the body, right? And I'm sure that you've looked at like German new medicine and a whole bunch of other new things, and as well in your
Yep.
journey. Yeah,
Yep. All that stuff. Frequency medicine. It's fascinating. All that kind of stuff.
yeah. It's really, yeah, vibrational medicine, all that kind of stuff like homeopathy and even
Yep.
certain types of sound healing are really healthy as well. All of it, all of it, all of it, Mary. So I've got a few more questions here.
Sure.
Um, so your your work now has kind of done a full circle back to being around people who were where you were as a child. What's that been like for you?
Um, the first word that comes to mind is it was triggering because, especially in its extreme forms, some of the extreme situations that I've seen in my work, it just kind of made me realize, like, oh yeah, like I was in a similar situation like that, and I got out. But there's many people who didn't get out, or who don't want to get out, for that matter. And so it was triggering that way, but also just really hard to see, hard to work with families who are still stuck in that mindset and that mentality, because I know exactly what that mindset mentality is like. As I lived it, I thought the same things. Like I didn't ever think outside the box when I was younger. I just took for granted that this is how we live, and this is what is true, and that's what's not true. And so, yeah, me coming into contact with families who are in similar situations as I grew up in, it was really hard for me to be around them and to see how they were living, because it was quite similar to how I lived. And I mean, I see all the damage that it can do.
Like what? Like what's the kind of damage that you can see?
Well, some of these families that I visited, I could see it in the kids. There were some kids who were like very happy with their lifestyle and probably thriving, but I could also see others who were completely shut down, which is kind of how I was as a kid. Just shut down, not wanting to learn, not thinking you're capable of learning, thinking you're not worth much, or being very shy as well, like not wanting to make eye contact or speak up. So I saw a lot of that, and I can sense that's, yeah, that's the background I grew up in, and that's what they're growing up in, and I can see that it has that impact.
Hmm. And how has that been hard for you specifically? Like how, like you said initially it was triggering seeing like this mirroring back to you, this reflecting back of like, oh, I was here. And then when you try and communicate them, you can hear the density or the resistance in what you're trying to communicate, or you won't even speak to that because you just know It's not going to go
Right.
in. So why even mention it? Why even arouse that suspicion or tension or other outside thought? So what else makes it hard for you?
I guess I'm sort of a fixer and I want to fix things. And I
Yeah.
can see that, well, I can't really fix anything. I can't be of much help in this situation because they don't even realize there's a need for help. So I guess that also made it hard for me.
Hmm. Yeah, I can hear the hopelessness, like the
Hmm.
helplessness of like, oh, I can see what's out of alignment here. I can see that like the kids that are shut down, or they look like their vitality's dipped in some way, shape, or form, as to you can't teach them. And that was me. Like I was shut down. And then seeing that a pathway out,
Hmm.
and but then just not being able to install that or seed that or nurture that because of whatever. What kind of what stops you other than you don't think it would land?
Um, I guess that's the part of me that I'm still working on is
Right.
not caring what other people think. Like I could just say it even if I didn't think it would land, I could still say it anyway, but then I worry, well, what will they think of me or will they not like me or that kind of thing.
Thank you. So I've got something for you, Mary. Just it's a bit of an experiment. So
Sure.
if you were to have access to speaking to their entire congregation with no judgment, no guilt, and they were ready to receive whatever you have to say. You are standing at the front there. The pastor steps down. He hands you the mic, or if they even have a mic. What is it that you'd like to tell them that's completely outside of the box that is aligned with the Word of God beyond the Bible? That they really need to hear in their hearts. Like, what is it that you would tell them?
Where to start, I guess. Um, yeah, that's a good question. I guess at the end of the day, the thing that we're sold in those sorts of denominations is that you're broken and you need someone outside of you to save you. And I guess, and so in those denominations, it's like you need Jesus, you need God, you need the pastor to save you. And I guess the really heretical thing that I would stand up and say is that um, God is inside you. Like you are a part of God. God isn't a person out there who's sitting on the clouds just waiting to see what you do wrong. But you are a spark of the divine. Which, if I were to say that in those congregations, I'm sure I would get a lot of clueless looks like, what are you talking about? But that's what I have come to see through my journey.
Hmm.
It's like you don't need saving outside of yourself. You don't need someone outside of you to save you.
Thank you. I love that. I loved hearing you say that.
Hmm,
And I've got a piece for you if you're open to it.
sure.
So, what tends to happen is when you speak from that place, the body does jar, like because you're speaking to truth. The armoring in the body might look like a blank stare. It's like, oh, what are you talking about? What do you mean, spark of the divine? That doesn't,
Mhm.
this, that terminology even isn't even mentioned in the Bible. What do you even mean? What happens here, Mary, is that it activates something in the body, like that initial resistance that you might see on their faces is part of the armor getting a chink, getting an armor, getting a little crack in it.
Mhm.
And sometimes it can be a multi-generational crack where the parent receives it and is like, oh, but I'm not ready to have a look at that because it would mean me questioning my entire existence. But the crack actually trickles down into their children. And the crack's a little bit larger for the children. The armoring isn't as solidified in a child, which is the
Right.
beauty. And what I also see in what you said there, where was it? Where I was going to go? There was armoring. There's speaking the truth. Um, yeah, it's the awakening. Oh no, it's the rejection. Okay, so when whoever's speaking, when they're armored and preparing for the rejection, they can hold back, all right, or they're waiting for that to be recepted, waiting to be accepted. Because in those religions and in those institutions, when you're not allowed to be yourself, for example, even how you want to decorate yourself, like wearing jeans or wearing pants or doing whatever, or having a skirt that's a few inches above the knee,
Hmm.
what can show up there is your authentic expression, your creative expression is made sinful. And that's
Right.
kind of installed in there. And you're looking for that outside confirmation of, no, you can do that. Like, yeah, you just wear the dress, it's fine. Or wear the pants, it's fine. Like, just go and enjoy yourself. Feel where your edge is so you can discover what your own truth is and how you want to express yourself as the spark of the divine, right? So I
Hmm.
can hear that in that role play we just did, in that little virtual thing that we created, it brought up in real time what was going on in your body and potentially their bodies. And you can also speak to that. So what I find is really powerful is when you pre-warn the other person's body that this might feel like a shock to you, this might feel like you might not be ready to hear this. You might feel all kinds of odd things going on in your body, like the resistance, the tension. You may even stop breathing, or your breathing becomes really shallow. But what I want you to take in is that you really are the spark of the divine. And some of the words that have been sold to you are not you. You are not born of original sin. You are born of original creation. And in that place, there's innocence. And from that place of innocence, when you create and express from that place of innocence, life is a gift. Life is a joy. Relationships are a joy. Your full expression of who you are is a joy. And then from that place, you could really create a kingdom, a heaven on earth, your own kingdom, because your body is your own kingdom. When you honor your kingdom, people will want to admire and respect that kingdom because you have the internal respect that mirrors everybody else's respect. And you call that in, you call that love in. So I went on a bit of a tangent there, but
Well, I was just going to say that is what the Bible says. It says the kingdom of heaven is within you.
yeah, right. Totally. So this is what I love about having these kind of conversations, Mary, is that there is a little bit of truth in like Christianity and a lot of those religions, but I
Mhm.
find that the truth gets obscured by concepts like original sin, or that a woman cannot add any flavor or nuance to how the word is interpreted.
Right.
So what would you like? Yeah, are you familiar with all the new wave of Christians that are coming through? All these new like trad Christians that are,
Yeah, somewhat. And I've noticed too in like even in my circles, friends who let's say they let's say they were already Christians, but now they've kind of doubled down on it and they've become like almost fanatical about it. So yeah, I have noticed that.
yeah. What do you see in that? Like, what's your take on that?
I think because I noticed it starting to happen around or just after COVID kind of hit. And my sort of take on it, which I haven't thought about it a lot or researched it or anything, but I just kind of feel like the whole pandemic kind of sh it shook everybody up, and people went in different ways with it. Some people went down the soul searching path and like figuring out what's really going on, and other people didn't. And so they were kind of left feeling really unsettled by the whole thing and kind of scared, really, and a lot of fear. And so I think with a lot of people who are going back down those traditional Christian routes or the really fanatical Christian routes, I think it's fear and they're searching like, oh no, this pandemic happened, like it shook our world and they're trying to figure it out. And so they just have decided to go with Christianity because it gives them a lot of the answers, maybe not all the answers, but to them, it gives them some answers to try to um, calm their fears.
Mm. Yeah, what answers do you think it gives them?
I think, again, it's looking outside themselves and like, oh, God is in control and God is going to take care of us. And I don't know, God's going to burn everything up anyways. And then we'll go to heaven and we'll all be fine. And this nightmare will be behind us, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can see that too. And now that you've mentioned that, I want to just super quickly speak to those, oopsie daisy, those of you that might be listening, at the concept of a transcendental future and how a transcendental future is something that is happens in the afterlife, like when you die, and there's a future that's presented to you, which can be more attractive than present time. And religions become particularly attractive because of that. Like, for example, with Islam, there's if you do certain acts, then you have 40 virgins, and then in heaven, like I went through a lot of churches who had a an abundant message where I remember one pastor in particular would say, give money now so you can build up your treasures in heaven, right? So that kind of pernicious, give money to us now, so therefore your afterlife will be even better than your present life. And what I find in the context of the five personality patterns is someone who has a lot of leaving pattern in them, an unintegrated leaving pattern in them, will prefer to aim their presence and their life force to an afterlife. So they're much more inclined to seek out a religion or a teaching where their afterlife is better than their present life because they don't feel welcome here, present life, because they don't feel welcome here. They don't feel part of the grounded earthly collective. They'd rather escape into a past, a future life fantasy, because the fantasy is what keeps them happy. The fantasy gives them a purpose, because if they were to face the reality of their life, like I'm holding up my hand like a mirror here, facing the reality of their life, they need to come to grips with that they are responsible for their own emotional landscape. They are responsible for what they're here for. They are responsible for the relationships that they create, which can be very challenging for someone who has a leaving pattern in them because they haven't got the bandwidth in their body to be with the the downloading of emotions, not really downloading, it's more of an inloading of emotions that come through the body when you're confronted with that existential anxiety. So instead of being with existential anxiety and the void and the unknown, they'd rather look for a known in a religion or some kind of doctrine that gives them that safety outside of themselves.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of members of different religions, they're really deeply scared and they need some sort of comfort. And so they grasp onto all these different teachings to make them feel comfortable.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And again, we're coming back to the body
Mhm.
where that you can't escape the gravity of the biology. So I see that religions in general demonize the body, make the flesh bad, so then you don't actually have an opportunity to explore it. Like so many pastors and teachers, they're not like psychologically or somatically trained. So they can't actually be with someone and be when they're distressed. It's like, oh, Jesus says this, or the Bible says this, but the Bible's not a person.
Mhm.
Like if you have a baby screaming, just putting a Bible on their chest isn't going to help them feel safe. All right. You need to hold
Right.
them. Right. So
Yeah.
there's a humanity that doctrine doesn't have because it's words, and words that aren't really yours. Like every individual is going to have their own words. So when I see the word is God, it's like the God is within you. You're a spark of the divine. And when you speak from that godly place, that is the word of God. Like you're
Right.
speaking the words of God in the moment, in the present moment, which is outside the time. It's outside of future time and past time. It's presence. It's in the present moment, which is all that really matters in the context of life and vitality. But yeah, I loved what you spoke to there in the church. If you were being a heretic, and I think that's something that I encourage in everybody is give themselves permission to be heretical. And for you, Mary, how would you like to give yourself more permission to be more heretical?
Well, it's doing what I'm doing now, which is saying what I think in front of other people.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and getting practice with that, I guess.
Yeah, great. Anything else you want to say? I feel like I'm gonna start wrapping this conversation up. Is there anything else you want to share to people who would be listening, who are curious or who maybe are in a religion or who are thinking about leaving, who are on the fence, or who are somebody who's thinking about going into religion? Is there anything that you want to say that this comes from the heart?
Um, well, I guess for me in my journey, I I had a very, very small bit of intuition at the beginning and I followed it. So I would encourage anyone who notices that small little voice or that small little bit of intuition to keep following it, because it takes you to great places. And also to anyone who is on the path, like whether they're just starting leaving a church or they're they've been on the journey of leaving for years now or however long it might be, like be very proud of yourself for doing it because it's not easy, especially when you've been controlled in a certain way. And I mean, usually it requires leaving family and friends and looking like a heretic in their eyes and being shunned and all of this stuff. So it's not easy. And even for myself, I had a lot of cognitive dissonance along the way. So yeah, for anyone at whatever stage of journey you're at, be very proud of yourself for doing it.
Hmm. Thank you, Mary. My parting words will be to more heresy, more heretical nature.
To more heresy, and thank you for letting me share my story.
My pleasure. Thank you all for listening. All right, mad love you all. Bye.